The harsh fluorescent lights of the Meridian Group's executive tower lobby seemed to drain all color from the marble floor, reflecting the hollow exhaustion in Alara's eyes. It was 3 a.m., the hour when the city exhaled its tired, stale air, and when the invisible workers began their shift. Alara, clad in a stiff, ill-fitting uniform the color of old cement, was one of them. She pushed a heavy cleaning cart that rattled a mournful, solitary tune across the silent, unforgiving stone. Her current task, polishing the imposing, curved mahogany reception desk that dominated the space. Its surface was meant to mirror the ambition of the people who walked past it in the daylight, but now it only mirrored the tired face of the woman wiping it down. Alara moved with a quiet, almost surgical precision that was entirely out of place for a janitorial job. She didn't scrub. She analyzed the residue of faint coffee ring, a smudge of lipstick, the trace of oil from a careless hand, and applied the solvent with minimal, economical effort. In the humid, chemical-scented silence, Alara felt the space. The silent humming of the servers 3 floors up, the faint vibration from the automated HVAC system. She could almost map the network of hidden conduits and data cables running beneath the floor. A latticework of information flow that she, in her former life, had only been concerned with on an astronomical scale. Now, the most complex network she cared about was the schedule of the night shift, ensuring she was nowhere near the executive offices when the early birds arrived. Her hands, rough and perpetually dry from the industrial-strength cleaner, still held the ghost memory of different textures, the cool, worn metal of an interferometer lens, the smooth, aged paper of a 17th-century mathematical journal, the complex, almost crystalline feel of a 3D printed model of a quasar's accretion disk. She kept them gloved, always. A small silver detail offered the first micro-reveal of her hidden world. Draped around her neck, tucked deep beneath the collar of her uniform, was a chain. It held a pendant, not a religious symbol or a locket, but a miniature, perfectly crafted replica of the pulsar map plaque from the Voyager 1 spacecraft. It was an iconic representation of Earth's position relative to 14 pulsars. A cosmic address meant for alien intelligence. It was her private compass, a silent reminder that she was still anchored to the stars, even if she was currently sweeping dust on the third rock from the sun. Alara's struggle wasn't just physical, it was linguistic. She spoke 4 languages fluently, including the dense, mathematically precise dialect of theoretical physics. But the language of this city, English, remained a jagged, insurmountable barrier for her. It wasn't a failure of intellect, but a consequence of trauma. When she spoke English, the words were flat, inflectionless and slow, a halting delivery that made the simplest request sound like a confession. She was an immigrant here on a temporary work visa, fleeing a political upheaval that had erased her laboratory, her reputation, and her brilliant fiancé in a single brutal night. Her current boss, the night supervisor, a man named Gary, saw only the difficulty, not the history. Gary shuffled into the lobby at 3:45 a.m., smelling of cheap coffee and impatience. He found Alara meticulously wiping down the glass security partition. Alara, Gary's voice was a low, gravelly complaint. He didn't wait for her to acknowledge him. The trash in the annex wing I told you needs to be segregated. The blue bins are for paper, the black for general. You mix them again. It's a fine for us, you hear? A fine. Alara stopped, her dark eyes, which had once mapped the light curves of distant supernova, fixed on the man. She struggled to form the correct response. Her mind raced to construct the accurate phrase. I thought it was, the bins were full. I apologize, too long, too complex. She managed, her voice a reedy whisper. By-blue ... Sorry. Gary threw his hands up in a gesture of exaggerated despair. See? This is what I'm saying. It's like talking to a wall. You don't speak our language, girl. Just nod and look confused. I'm gonna have HR cut you. I swear, the next trash mix-up, you're out. I need someone who understands simple instructions, not someone who's constantly off in her own little world. He punctuated his sentence with a dismissive wave toward the towering, multi-story structure. You think these people pay us to be confused? Clean that smudge off the glass. It looks like a fingerprint. The wrong kind of fingerprint. Alara silently obeyed, wiping the smudge with a focused intensity that bordered on violence. She bit back the overwhelming urge to correct him, to tell him that the stain was not a fingerprint but a complex residue of polymerized sugar and airborne pollutants, easily identifiable by its refractive index. But she didn't. She just cleaned. Survival demanded silence. As dawn approached, the first wave of Meridian Group employees began to arrive. Sharp suits, expensive shoes, the scent of ambition. Alara retreated to the shadowed corner near the service elevator, waiting for the all-clear to move to the lower level. A young man in a tailored gray suit, clearly a high-level manager, strode past her, talking loudly on his phone. "Yeah, so the whole presentation is hanging on the data model," he said into the phone, his voice echoing slightly. "But the Stellar division is completely bottlenecked. Their new satellite telemetry just isn't syncing with the legacy server farm. We've got a massive data drift. I mean, we're talking about a difference of almost 3 degrees in the orbital plane calculation. It's a disaster. If we can't get that convergence, the whole launch window slips." He paused right next to her cleaning cart, completely oblivious to her presence. The word stellar acted like a lightning rod. It was the name of the division, Meridian's crown jewel, which consulted on high-level aerospace and astrophysics projects. Alara's head lifted slowly, her eyes suddenly sharp and alive, focused not on the man but on the air around him, as if calculating the precise velocity needed to slap the phone from his hand. 3 degrees is not a data drift, her mind screamed in her native tongue, the words forming a perfect crystalline theorem. It's a foundational miscalculation of the initial conditions in the orbital mechanics. You're factoring in the solar constant without compensating for the gravitational lensing of the Jovian atmosphere. The convergence isn't failing, the initial model is flawed. A second, more profound micro-reveal materialized in her stillness. On the inside of her left wrist, hidden by the long sleeve of her uniform, was a small, perfectly rendered tattoo. It wasn't a decorative image. It was a mathematical constant. $E plus 1 equals $0. Euler's identity, sometimes called the most beautiful formula in mathematics, linking 5 fundamental constants. It was the mark of her fraternity, the small, elite club of theoretical physicists who saw the elegance of the universe summarized in a few symbols. She quickly pulled her sleeve down as the manager finished his call, completely unaware that the person closest to him, the one who could solve his multi-million-dollar crisis in 5 minutes, was debating whether the mop head was clean enough. He glanced at her, noticed the cart, and frowned, taking a wide, deliberate step away. "Could you maybe move that ... obstruction?" he asked, his tone indicating she was the filthiest thing in the room. Alara, focused on her survival, just nodded, pulled the cart back, and whispered her universal sign-off. "Blue ... full. Sorry." She vanished into the service hallway, the silent genius fading into the shadows of the building she was paid to keep clean. The universe she was meant to study was infinitely complex, but the rules of this basement-level life were brutally simple. Be quiet, be invisible, and never ever reveal the truth. The basement floor of the Meridian Group building was a maze of concrete and humming machinery, the beating, ugly heart of the pristine corporate entity above. Alara spent her mornings here, organizing the mountains of recycled paper and cardboard. The air was dry, metallic, and carried the continuous low-frequency thrum of the building's infrastructure. It was here, amidst the dust and forgotten storage, that she found the solitude to let her mind wander, a necessary escape from the relentless demands of her new reality. Her current life was a scar, a deep, jagged rupture from her past. Before the uniform, before the scrubbing brushes, there had been the Institute of Theoretical Astrophysics in Odessa. Alara had not merely been a student or a researcher. At 29, she was the youngest director of a major orbital mechanics lab in the country. Her specialty, gravitational wave detection and predictive modeling for deep space colonization probes. The tragedy that brought her here was not sudden, but a slow, crushing inevitability wrapped in political turmoil. 3 years ago, her lab was targeted, not for scientific data, but for the cutting-edge, dual-use technology they had developed, a highly complex quantum entanglement-based communication matrix. Her fiancé, Dr. Kazimir Volkov, was the architect of the software. Kazimir, with his perpetual scent of coffee and dry erase markers, had been the light of her universe. Their life was a beautiful, chaotic symphony of late-night calculations, shared breakthroughs, and the simple joy of realizing they were the only 2 people on Earth who saw the same glorious, abstract patterns in the cosmos. When the military faction demanded the Matrix's core code, Kazimir refused. He knew its weaponization potential. In a final, desperate act to protect his life's work and Alara, he initiated a self-destruct sequence for the main servers. It bought Alara minutes, just enough time for her colleagues to hustle her out of the back exit, clutching only a small, data-encrypted drive that held the single, non-operational copy of Kasimir's algorithm, her most precious, yet useless, inheritance. Kazimir, refusing to flee, was detained and vanished into the widening jeer of the conflict. Alara was later told he died resisting. She carried the pulsar mat pendant, a gift from him, like a lead weight in her chest. Fleeing became her only option. She used her academic connections to secure a temporary labor visa far away, swearing an oath of silence and anonymity. The language barrier wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate shield. The halting, broken English, the confused looks, they were masks to hide a mind that could calculate interplanetary trajectories in her head. She had traded the universe of knowledge for the universe of quiet, hard labor. Later that afternoon, while collecting the trash cans from the break room, Alara encountered Barry, the corpulent, self-important day security guard. Barry enjoyed making his rounds precisely when the cleaning staff was present, leveraging his minor authority to feel significant. Alara was struggling to wrestle a jammed bin lid free. The lid was warped, likely from being run through the industrial washer too hot. "Having trouble, comrade," Barry drawled, leaning against the doorframe, a smirk wrinkling his face. "Must be those advanced Soviet mechanics. Can't figure out a simple pivot, can we?" Alara felt the familiar wave of frustrated heat rise in her neck. She knew the exact structural flaw, a misalignment of the zinc alloy hinge pin, needing a slight counterclockwise torque at the base. She reached for the small multi-tool she kept clipped to her belt, a tool she'd once used to adjust the delicate calibration of a radio telescope. "No tools. No tools," Barry barked, suddenly straightening. "We don't need engineers cleaning up here. We need cleaners. Just kick it, girl. Use some muscle." Or maybe he lowered his voice to a conspiratorial sneer. "Maybe you should try talking to it. Tell it open sesame. In your language." Ilara's jaw tightened. She saw his mockery, but also his impatience. She did not want confrontation. Instead of kicking it, she used her specialized knowledge. She applied pressure not to the handle, but precisely to the fulcrum point where the hinge met the plastic, a tiny pressure point that relieved the internal tension. Click. The lid snapped open easily. Barry stared, momentarily stunned. "Huh. Beginner's luck," he muttered, quickly moving past her. His moment of dominance evaporated. Alara didn't look up. She felt a small, bitter pang of competence. She had fixed a $30 trash can with the same focus she used to fix a multi-million-dollar satellite failure. Microveal number 3. Her approach to even the most mundane physical problem was one of applied engineering, not brute force. The Meridian Group was hosting a small internal technology seminar later that week. Alara was tasked with setting up the conference room. A young, eager marketing intern named Chloe was supervising the arrangement of the display screens. Chloe was a whirlwind of nervous energy, her phone pressed to her ear, relaying instructions to a catering company. She saw Alara connecting a power strip for the video monitors. "No, no, no, stop." Chloe rushed over, her face panicked. "That outlet is for the projection system, not the monitor. We need the stable current from the main wall socket for the video feed." "I can't have the picture cutting out mid-presentation." Alara had already noted the outlet. It was on a separate circuit from the main power grid, rated for high surge tolerance, precisely where you should plug in sensitive multi-screen video equipment to avoid brownouts during peak load. The main wall socket, ironically, was shared with the high-wattage coffee urn. Alara tried to explain, stumbling over the complicated English lexicon for electrical isolation. Swal.chair.power. "No good," she managed, pointing to the coffee machine. Chloe rolled her eyes and sighed dramatically, loud enough for others nearby to hear. "Oh, bless her heart, she's trying. Look, sweetie, just plug it in where I tell you. I know you're new and maybe back home electricity's different, but here we just use the main sockets. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, okay? Just do what I say. It's a simple job, not rocket science." Chloe giggled at her own joke. A fire ignited in Alara's chest, banked by years of suppression. Rocket science. That was her field. She was a rocket scientist. The irony was a physical ache. She quietly moved the power strip to the wall socket as instructed, but before plugging it in, she subtly flipped a small, nearly invisible switch on the back of the power stripper switch that engaged an internal surge protector and a small, battery-backed reserve she had brought from home for her own electronic devices. It was a calculated risk. She couldn't fix the power source, but she could protect the equipment. Microveal number 4. She carried professional-grade electronic safety equipment, far beyond what a cleaner would need. "See? Easy," Chloe said, patronizingly patting Alara's shoulder. "Thanks. Now can you get the water jugs? And try not to spill any." Alara felt the weight of her uniform, the symbol of her enforced ignorance. She was being judged not just by her language, but by the assumption that her lack of English meant a lack of intelligence. The injustice tightened the emotional arc, shifting from empathy for her situation to frustration at the constant disrespect. The true pressure came 2 days later, back in the dim, stale environment of the night shift. Gary, the supervisor, cornered Alara by the supply closet. He held a crumpled, official-looking printout. "This is it, Alara," he said, his face a mask of false sympathy hiding genuine relief. "HR has flagged you. 3 official warnings this month alone. Language barrier issues, failure to follow sorting protocols, unnecessary use of company resources. That last one was about you using too much specialized glass cleaner on the CEO's office window. Too shiny, apparently." I need this," Alara whispered, the words painful to extract. "I send money." She was supporting her elderly aunt who remained overseas. Gary scoffed. "Everyone needs this, Alara. But this isn't a charity. It's a job. And frankly, you're costing me time." "Look," he leaned in, his breath sour. "I have a new hire coming in next week. A nice kid, speaks English like a native. If you want to keep this job, you have one chance. Tomorrow, the CEO's private conference room on the 50th floor. He's hosting a highly sensitive private meeting with a Saudi delegation. You have to clean it perfectly, and I mean perfectly. No dust, no smudges, no mistakes. And most importantly," he tapped the paper with a thick finger, "you are to be completely invisible, silent, zero interaction. If anyone from that delegation complains about the cleaning staff, you're out. For good." Gary looked her over, his gaze dismissive. "I highly doubt you'll manage it. You're always looking at the walls, not cleaning them. Just clean, Alara. Stop thinking." "You don't have the luxury for that anymore." Alara took the warning slip, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the raw, metallic taste of humiliation. "Stop thinking." It was an order that required her to violate her very nature. Her ability to think, to calculate, to analyze, to see patterns, was the only thing they hadn't taken from her. She looked up at Gary, her dark eyes holding a depth he couldn't possibly comprehend. She nodded once, the single gesture confirming the pact. She would clean the room, she would be silent, and she would survive to clean another day. But as she walked away, the knowledge of the Stellar Division's ongoing crisis, the 3-degree orbital error the young manager had mentioned, kept gnawing at her. That crisis was potentially stalling a multi-billion-dollar project for the most powerful defense client in the country. And the cleaning job, the menial task keeping her fed, was a hair's breadth from being taken away. The rising tension was almost unbearable. The 50th floor conference room was known simply as the Zenith, a panoramic space encased in floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a dizzying view of the city. It was the epitome of Meridian Group's power and Alara's assigned final test. She arrived at 6 a.m., 2 hours before the CEO and the Saudi delegation were due. The atmosphere was already thick with stressed energy. A team of young IT technicians was frantically prepping the room's sophisticated AV system. The main display, a vast seamless LED wall, was running a placeholder graphic, but the air was humming with professional anxiety. Alara moved silently, her movements economical and precise. She polished the glass table, which felt impossibly vast. With a specially formulated solution she had paid for herself, designed to repel fingerprints for hours, she wiped the monitors with microfiber cloths, ensuring no static dust remained. She was a ghost, a blur of gray uniform, acutely aware of the ticking clock and the immense stakes. The initial crisis, data loss, as she was polishing a console near the presentation podium. She overheard the chief IT technician, a nervous, sweating man named Marcus, whisper urgently into his headset, No, the encrypted feed is gone. I can't restore the backup. It's not a hardware issue, it's a file corruption. It looks like a recursive memory overflow. We can't run the core presentation without the high-resolution, layered geological survey data. It's the entire point of the meeting." Marcus slammed his hand onto the podium in frustration. "The CEO is going to kill us. The data package, it's 3 days of proprietary seismic modeling, worth $50 million in consulting fees alone. If we can't show the 3D depth maps, the delegation walks." It's an impossible challenge. The internal pressure in the room immediately escalated from low-level stress to genuine panic. Alara froze, her polishing cloth hanging limp. She recognized the term recursive memory overflow. It was a common vulnerability in older, linear sequence data architectures, a flaw her team had meticulously patched in all their own complex systems years ago. It wasn't file corruption. It was a specific type of memory mismanagement that could be reversed if caught early and handled with non-standard tools. She knew she shouldn't interfere. Her job was to be invisible. Her visa, her job, her survival, it all depended on her silence. But the sheer incompetence on display, the utter waste of valuable scientific work, activated an instinct deeper than survival. She had risked everything for knowledge. And watching these men bumble away $50 million worth of highly complex data due to a simple technical oversight was physically painful. Marcus paced frantically, pulling at his hair. I need someone who understands legacy server file structures. Anyone. We have 10 minutes. Alara slowly approached the podium. She still couldn't speak fluent, fast, technical English, but she knew the language of computer systems. She pointed to the blank command prompt visible on the large LED screen, then pointed to the small, inconspicuous external drive Marcus had sitting next to the console. Disk. Not safe, she whispered, her voice husky from lack of use. System ... need. Patch. Marcus looked at her as if she were a piece of misplaced furniture that had suddenly spoken. What? What are you saying? Lady, I'm kind of busy here trying to save my career, so if you could just get back to the furniture polishing. She doesn't speak English, Marcus. Ignore her, one of the other technicians muttered dismissively. She's the new cleaner. Probably just worried about her mop. Alara ignored them. She reached out and with a quick, practiced movement typed a short, complex string of characters into the command line on the screen. It was an access code, followed by a command that opened the root-level diagnostics. Micro-reveal number 5. Her typing speed and accuracy, even on an unfamiliar keyboard, was that of a professional programmer. The sequence was too fast, too complex for a casual user. Marcus stared at the screen, momentarily paralyzed. Wait. What did you just do? That's the admin shell. How did you get that password? Alara pointed to the error log scrolling rapidly on the screen. She then pointed to the sequence of recursive calls that indicated the data hemorrhage. She looked Marcus straight in the eye, her dark gaze commanding and intense. She used her hands to demonstrate, tapping her left hand rapidly against her right. Loop. Endless. Need. Non-standard. Kernel. She was trying to explain that they needed to interrupt the process using an emergency, low-level kernel command, not a standard system utility. One of the younger technicians, who had been skeptical, leaned closer to the screen. Wait, she's right. That's a classic Z-stack error signature. If we run a clean-state kernel interrupt, we might be able to pause the overflow and isolate the corrupted sector before it propagates further. He looked at Alara. His eyes narrowed in confusion. How the hell does she know Z-stack protocol? Marcus, desperate and terrified, saw a flicker of hope. He realized this woman, who he'd been told spoke no English, had just correctly diagnosed the problem his entire team had missed. The stakes were too high to care about the source of the knowledge. Okay, look, I don't know who you are, but you've got 5 minutes. Can you fix it? Marcus thrust his own keyboard toward her. Alara took the keyboard. Her breathing deepened, shifting from the quiet rhythm of a cleaner to the focused, controlled pace of someone performing high-stakes surgery. All thoughts of Gary, her job, and the uniform vanished. She was back in the lab. The challenge was pure. The data needed to be saved. She began typing a sequence of commands faster than before. She was bypassing the system's standard recovery shell, diving deep into the binary structure. She wasn't using the mouse. She was manipulating the core system using keyboard shortcuts that were decades out of date but inherently more powerful. The other technicians gathered around, their mockery replaced by awe and tension. She's writing a temporary script to redirect the memory pointer, one whispered. No, wait, she's building a data fork. She's routing the overflow to a dummy file and backing up the clean sectors simultaneously. That's PhD-level diagnostics? Alara's brow was furrowed in concentration. The only sound in the room, besides the frantic click of the keys, was her soft, rhythmic exhalation. Her left hand, the one bearing the Oiler's identity tattoo, moved with a grace and certainty that defied her cleaning uniform. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she hit enter. The error log vanished. The screen flashed green text. Data integrity check. Pass. Sectors isolated. Marcus let out a ragged, shaky breath. He checked the file structure. It's back. The seismic data is all there, stable and ready to render. We're green. He looked at Alara, completely bewildered. His initial anger evaporated, replaced by profound, unsettling confusion. Alara, having completed the task, immediately pulled her hands back and retreated a step, shrinking back into the role of the cleaner. Her face was neutral, her breathing returning to normal. Thank you. Saved, she murmured, pointing to the screen, still using the basic stunted English. Marcus was speechless. He stared at the sophisticated code still visible on the screen, then at the silent woman in the gray uniform. How does a cleaner know how to manually patch a recursive memory overflow in a proprietary server architecture? He asked, the question hanging heavy and unanswered in the air. The CEO, Mr. Hawthorne, and his personal assistant entered the zenith just then. They took in the scene, the frantic IT team, the relieved expression on Marcus's face, and the cleaner standing silently by the console. "What is going on here?" Mr. Hawthorne demanded, his voice sharp and dangerous. "I expected this room to be pristine, not a circus," Marcus, still buzzing with adrenaline, stammered. "Sir, a small data crisis, but it's solved. Everything is stable. The presentation is ready." Hawthorne looked directly at Alara, who was already pushing her cart toward the door, trying to disappear. His assistant, a woman named Vanessa, intercepted her. "Wait," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "Who are you? I saw you touching the equipment." Gary, Alara's supervisor, arrived at that exact moment, having rushed up to ensure his ultimatum was being met. He saw Alara near the console, and his face went pale with terror. "Alara, what did I tell you? Invisible, silent, you touched the equipment?" Gary whispered, his desperation eclipsing his authority. "Hawthorne, sir, I apologize. She doesn't speak English well. She must have misunderstood. I'll fire her immediately." Stakes were maximum. Alara had saved the company tens of millions of dollars. Yet she was about to be fired for the unforgivable sin of competence. The ultimate confrontation was about to begin, and she was caught. Standing between the universe she had fled and the life she needed to survive. The Zenith conference room went instantly silent, the air crackling with the unspoken tension between the CEO, Mr. Hawthorne, the terrified supervisor, Gary, and the silent cleaner, Alara. Mr. Hawthorne, a man whose patience was inversely proportional to his net worth, fixed his cold, analytical gaze on the woman in the gray uniform. "Gary," he began, his voice dangerously soft, "is this the employee who doesn't speak our language?" Gary, sweating profusely, wrung his hands. "Yes, sir." "Alara, look, sir, she just touched the console. I'm sure she didn't mean any harm. I'll handle it. She's gone by the end of the shift. I promise you." Vanessa, the CEO's assistant, stepped forward, her expensive perfume clashing with the subtle scent of cleaning solvent clinging to Alara. "Mr. Hawthorne, I insist we let security escort her out now. We have a high-level meeting. Her presence is a liability." Marcus, the chief IT technician, suddenly found his voice. He had a career to save, and he was no longer thinking about seniority, but about the truth. "Wait, Mr. Hawthorne, sir, you need to know something," Marcus interrupted, stepping between the CEO and Alara. "She didn't cause a problem, she solved one. 5 minutes ago, we lost the entire core presentation data package, $50 million in seismic modeling. Gone due to a massive recursive memory overflow." Hawthorne's eyes widened slightly, the first sign of genuine alarm. "You lost the data? You risked the Saudi deal?" "We had lost it, sir." "But she," Marcus pointed at Alara. "She diagnosed the Z-stack error immediately. She then wrote a manual low-level kernel interrupt script to bypass the corrupted sectors and save the files. It was an advanced non-standard recovery protocol. She saved the presentation and the deal." The room collectively gasped. Gary's jaw went slack. Vanessa looked personally offended. Hawthorne slowly turned his gaze back to Alara. She stood motionless, her posture suggesting neither defiance nor guilt, merely resignation. "He did this?" Hawthorne asked, abandoning his demanding tone for pure curiosity. Alara struggled to articulate, the pressure locking her English. "Data ... stable now. Clean." She gestured toward the polished table, trying to redirect the focus back to her assigned task. Hawthorne stepped closer, examining her. He noticed the surgical precision in her movements, the depth in her eyes. Z-stack error fix. That requires a proficiency in system architecture, coding languages, and memory allocation algorithms that far exceeds anyone on Marcus's team. He paused, a brilliant, terrifying realization dawning on his face. "This isn't a fluke. This isn't a janitor." He lowered his voice. "Who are you, really? And why are you cleaning my floors?" Alara felt the internal dam break. The weight of her assumed identity, the necessity of silence, finally gave way to the need for self-preservation, and more importantly, the need to honor the brilliant mind she was forced to hide. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in 3 years, she spoke in her native Russian, the words flowing like a torrent, but the meaning clear. "I am not a cleaner. I am a scientist. My name is Alara Rostova, and I require safety and anonymity to perform my work, which is why I took this position. I was hoping to remain unseen, but incompetence is a higher risk than revelation. She immediately translated her final sentence into slow, perfectly articulated English. Incompetence is a higher risk than revelation. Hawthorne didn't understand the Russian, but he understood the sudden, intense shift in her demeanor and the precision of the English translation. He looked at the code still running on the display screen. "Marcus, tell me what this code is doing," the CEO commanded. Marcus nervously tapped a few keys, expanding the window. "Sir, it looks like a predictive orbital trajectory model." "No, wait. It's a full-spectrum gravitational lensing compensation algorithm. It's factoring in relativistic time dilation on communication signals," Vanessa scoffed. "Gravitational what? She's the cleaner. She's lying." Alara turned to Vanessa, her eyes flashing with cold, mathematical anger. She spoke slowly, deliberately, in flawless, accent-free English, using precise, professional terminology. "The orbital mechanics model your stellar division is using for the X5 launch," Alara stated. Her voice slicing through the tension, "is flawed. You have a 3-degree calculation error because you are neglecting to factor in the differential mass density of the outer Jovian atmosphere during perihelion. That is not data drift. It is a fundamental flaw in the foundational equation. If you launch with this error, your probe will miss its target window by 72 hours, resulting in a minimum 3-month mission delay and a $500 million loss." She walked to the podium, pulled a marker from her cart, and turned to the large glass wall. She did not write a formula, she drew a diagram. In one elegant, sweeping motion, she drew a perfectly accurate depiction of the faulty orbital path, marked the point of error, and then, using a different color marker, drew the correct, compensated trajectory. Beneath it, she wrote, in the elegant script of a seasoned academic, $delta heta, approx frac $, reveal, that Mr. Hawthorne is the simplified lensing equation that your engineers missed. I am Dr. Alara Rostova. Before politics took my lab, I ran the premier astrophysics research facility in Eastern Europe, and my fiancé, Dr. Kazimir Volkov, wrote the data synchronization matrix you now rely upon. The room was utterly silenced. Gary looked like he was about to faint. Vanessa's face had lost all color. Hawthorne, a brilliant man himself who had built his empire on recognizing genius, stared at the equation on the glass, then at the pulsating map pendant around her neck, and finally into her eyes. He saw the truth, raw and undeniable. You're the lost physicist, the one the international community thought was liquidated during the upheaval. The woman who pioneered the quantum entanglement comes link, Hawthorne whispered, the gravity of her identity settling upon him. Hawthorne straightened, his expression shifting from shock to calculating awe. Gary, Hawthorne snapped, turning to the trembling supervisor, you have threatened to fire a woman who just saved this company and its most sensitive project. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation into hostile work environment and gross managerial incompetence. Clean out your locker. Gary mumbled something incoherent about the language barrier, but Hawthorne cut him off with a look of lethal finality. The language barrier, Gary, was your failure to recognize genius when it was scrubbing your floors. He then turned to Marcus. Marcus, you're cleared. Go prep the correct data model and introduce this equation to the stellar team. They have 5 minutes to understand it before the delegation arrives. Finally, Hawthorne walked back to Alara, who stood, marker in hand, ready to retreat again. Dr. Rostova, he said, holding out his hand. You came here seeking anonymity and a job. You have saved my entire company's reputation, and more importantly, you possess the knowledge needed to fix the most critical technical flaw in our most important division. The cleaning job is terminated. Alara looked at his hand, then at her own, rough and scarred from the chemicals. Instead, Hawthorne continued, a victorious glint in his eye. I am offering you the director position of the Stellar Division. Triple the salary, full relocation, and a dedicated team. Your only requirement, fix the X5 model and run my aerospace research. You will have full immunity, a new identity if you wish, and the highest security clearance. And you can speak any language you damn well please. Alara looked around the room, at Marcus, whose relieved gratitude was genuine, at Vanessa, whose face was etched with shame, and finally at the elegant, complex equation she had scrawled on the glass. The universe was calling her back. A faint smile touched her lips. She took the CEO's hand, a grip firm and dry. There is one condition, Mr. Hawthorne, she said, her English now smooth and assured. I need resources. Specifically, I need access to deep archival telemetry data from your Jupiter missions, and a high-security server connection. I need to know what happened to Casimir's work. Done, Hawthorne agreed instantly. Welcome back to the stars, Doctor. The next 2 days were a dizzying whirlwind of transformation. Alara's gray cement uniform was replaced by custom-tailored clothing that fit her frame perfectly, the fabric feeling light and strong like a second skin. Her small, dusty locker in the basement was emptied, and her meager possessions, including the small, encrypted data drive containing Casimir's algorithm, were moved to a secure, expansive new apartment overlooking the city. Gary, the former supervisor, was gone, escorted out by security. His pleas of it was just a misunderstanding echoing the hollow injustice he had inflicted on others. Vanessa, the CEO's assistant, offered Alara a grudging, highly formalized apology that Alara accepted with quiet dignity, seeing the shame in the assistant's eyes as sufficient punishment. Marcus, the IT technician, became Alara's immediate unofficial deputy. He was tasked by Hawthorne with ensuring Dr. Rostova had everything she needed. I still can't believe it, Marcus confided. Standing in what was now Alara's immense corner office, the Zenith conference room had been permanently converted into the new Stellar Division headquarters. You solved the $50 million data crisis in 3 minutes, and then fixed the $500 million orbital flaw just by looking at a model. Alara, sitting behind a custom-built desk designed for complex modeling, merely smiled, tapping the pulsar map pendant. The universe is built on patterns, Marcus. If you see the pattern, the problem becomes simple. Her first priority as director was not the X5 launch, but utilizing Meridian's vast network to access the high-security international telemetry data she had requested. She worked for 36 straight hours, fueled by espresso and the single-minded focus of a genius on a long-lost truth. She used the Stellar Division's high-speed server connection to cross-reference every publicly available and privately archived military and intelligence report she could find regarding the political upheaval that had taken Casimir. She wasn't just searching for her fiancé, she was searching for his work. Finally, late on the second night, she found it. A faint, almost untraceable signal, a ghost ping from a deactivated deep storage server complex thousands of miles away. It contained a data log, a final, encrypted message left by Casimir Volkov. Alara's hand shook as she decrypted it. It was not a loving farewell, though she felt his love in the meticulously protected algorithm. It was a professional log entry, dated moments before his capture. ... Data is secured. Algorithm transferred to the only viable portable memory unit. Destination: Alara. The matrix is non-operational, requiring a specific quantum key sequence to initiate. Crucially, I faked the detonation log. I did not destroy the core communication engine, only locked it down. The matrix is still intact in the facility, waiting for the key. I could not let them weaponize it, but I could not destroy the future either. Keep looking up, Moya Zvezda. Tears streamed down Alara's face, not of grief, but of profound, overwhelming validation. Casimir was dead, confirmed by a later addendum, but his sacrifice was not just for her. He had protected his work. The technology that could change deep space communication. The quantum entanglement matrix was dormant, waiting for her unique key to awaken it. She now had a purpose far beyond her own survival. The Meridian Group building no longer felt cold and sterile. The Stellar Division under Dr. Elara Rostova had become a vibrant, buzzing hub of innovation. Her office, the Zenith, was filled with holographic projections of star maps, complex 3D orbital models, and the scent of strong coffee and new technology. The X5 probe launch, using Alara's corrected orbital model, had been a perfect success, saving the company billions and cementing her reputation internationally. The transformation was absolute. The environment, the basement, once her lonely domain, was now a high-tech clean room housing the Project Prometheus servers, Alara's personal initiative. Secondary characters. Marcus, the once flustered IT chief, was now the Stellar Division's chief systems architect, confident and respected, learning complex astrophysics protocols from Alara. The younger technician, who had first noticed the Z-stack error, was now leading a small, dedicated programming team. The antagonist. Gary was working as a clerk in a small, remote government office, his arrogance completely deflated. He had learned the harsh lesson that judging people by their clothes or their accent leads to ruin. Alara. She was no longer hiding. Her English was fluent, sharp, and precise. She was recognized on the street not as the cleaner but as the brilliant scientist who had saved the X5 mission. She wore the pulsar pendant openly, no longer a hidden compass but a symbol of remembrance and defiance. Alara was using the Meridian Group's resources not just for corporate gain, but to pursue Casimir's legacy. Project Prometheus was her effort to create the necessary quantum key to remotely activate the dormant matrix. She was bringing the dead technology back to life, planning to open source the communication matrix for the betterment of global science, honoring Casimir's original vision. 1 year later, on a Friday afternoon, Alara was walking through the Meridian Group's gleaming lobby. She stopped by the imposing, curved mahogany reception desk, now spotless and shining, a testament to her early, rigorous training. A new cleaner, a young man who looked overwhelmed and nervous, was struggling to load the heavy cart with fresh supplies. He dropped a bottle of cleaning solution, which rolled across the marble floor toward Alara's expensive leather shoe. Alara bent down and picked up the bottle. The young man stammered an apology in halting, heavily accented English. "Sorry. I'm not good at this double," quotes. Alara smiled gently. She looked into his eyes, not seeing a cleaner, but a person with a story. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Take your time," she said, her voice clear and kind. "It's a simple job, but the work you do here is important. Always remember that what you do is not who you are." She stood up, adjusted the pulsar map around her neck, and walked toward the high-speed elevator, ascending not to the basement but to the zenith, to the stars. The world had tried to silence her, to reduce her to a uniform and a mop, but in the end, her genius, hidden behind a language barrier and a cleaning cart, had shattered the mockery and illuminated the true path forward. She had found peace, not by forgetting her past, but by embracing her identity and reclaiming the brilliance she had sacrificed for survival. The cleaning woman was gone. Dr. Rostova had returned. Subscribe, like, and comment your location. What do you think Alara will discover when she finally activates the quantum entanglement matrix?